Welcome. I'm Danica Tormolin with TSNN, and I'm joined by Mark Cochrane, who is going to chat with us today a little bit about the UFI in the Asia Pacific region. They just finished with their regional conference earlier this month in Macau, and Mark is the regional director, right? So you run the
That's right.
association for UFI in the region, and you work out of your home office in Hong Kong.
Today I'm at the home office, but we also have an
Okay.
office here in Hong Kong, yeah, to serve Asia Pacific.
Well, welcome to
Thank
TSNN.
you.
Our thought with this was we'd go around the world and check in with each of the different regions around the world on a monthly basis. And this stop is yours. So I am
Great.
curious about what is going on in Asia Pacific, especially because you just had your meeting. Before I jumped on, I did go watch some of the recap videos that were posted.
Yep.
Really nice. It looked like a beautiful event. The stage was lovely, a huge, nice screen in the background, a pretty room. What was that venue like?
It was excellent. It was the Parisian Macao, one of the casinos. Macau is obviously the Las Vegas of Asia. So all the big players that would be familiar to people in Vegas are here. So, yep, we were in the Parisian, beautiful venue, and we had almost 300 delegates from 20 countries and regions around Asia. This was it was a special one, this Asia Pacific conference, because we had planned to go to Macau in February 2020. So we've been waiting 4 years to do it at this location. And I guess for a lot of viewers, it might sound crazy that we had to wait that long, but the way COVID was handled in Asia, in some countries in Asia, was obviously very different from the US. So China, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, a lot of markets didn't open for business again until January 2023. So yeah, we had to wait 4 years, but it was worth the wait.
So, did you have an event last year in 2023?
We did, and the reason we didn't go to Macau last year was because they weren't open in time to host it
Right.
for 2023. So we went to KL, to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and that was a great way to sort of reopen after COVID. Southeast Asia moved a little faster than China in terms of opening for business and removing restrictions. So that's why we went there first.
Yeah, it makes sense. So now it's just over a year that it's been reopened. So, what's the feeling? What was the conversation?
Good. There was good buzz, I would say. I mean, we had great content, but what I felt more than anything was just the excitement to get back to networking. Lots of people who hadn't seen each other in now years. And then we had a lot of first timers as well. I'd have to look up the exact number, but it was very significant because we had a large number of delegations come from mainland China to Macau. So as a result, the buzz at the event was really great, and we had some new features at the event, like the Event Directors Summit, which we launched in Maastricht last year at the European Conference, and it's an event that's co-located. It's a half-day seminar, and it's focused on event directors. So usually at UFI conferences, we tend to get the regional directors, the general managers, but we really wanted to engage the people responsible for organizing the event. So the Event Director Summit was held on the Thursday morning. It was really good. Had 20 event directors responsible for a wide range of exhibitions from different markets. We had an ice-breaking event where they had to they had to do what's called the skywalk around Macau Tower, which is 230 meters in the air, and it's
I
not
was
bungee jumping. It's not bungee
Yeah.
jumping, but it's close. They strap you in and you have to walk around the outside. So you're actually outside of the tower. I did it. I'm glad to say.
I saw you in the video and I saw that just there was a clip in one of the videos. So we will have a link to those videos in our show
Oh,
notes so
great.
that people can take a look at the recap. So there's a recap from I think day 1, day 2, and then overall with some evening activities. And that is captured on there too. And I was wondering what that was. It looked like base jumping or something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
not quite in
That you were
adrenaline
strapped in for
inducing,
that.
but it
Yeah.
was. I mean, yeah, it was exhilarating, and there were a few beers down quickly afterwards. But yeah, so that was the Wednesday night to kick off the event director summit, and then the EDS, as we call it, that was led by Ben Vichai, who is an independent consultant. And they delved into audience segmentation, how to grow your event, how to grow your audience, key points like leadership points, like how to motivate your team to try something new, to innovate, to try new initiatives. It's really good. And we'll definitely be doing it again next year in 2025, when we go to Melbourne.
So it was your first time of doing that in Asia Pacific region, right? Yeah.
It
Okay.
was.
And 20. And then you said at the end you're going where in 25?
We're going to Australia for the first time. So we'll be in Melbourne in mid-March next year. Yeah.
So around the same time, a little bit later.
Yeah, it's always around the same time. It's always from sort of mid-February to mid-March, somewhere in there, just depending on what works with the local host.
So it looked like a great event coming back. Was that one of your largest events that you've
It,
worked on? You've
it
been there for a little while.
I have been for a while, yeah. I think the largest we've ever had was Tokyo in 2019, right before COVID, or the year before. And this would have been, I believe, our second largest. It was very similar to the numbers in Tokyo. Yeah, it was great. Really good.
Good news. Who was your favorite speaker?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I
Okay.
will.
Well, we can.
No, yeah, my favorite session was Mark Harper from Swire. For those in your audience who don't know, so Swire is a Hong Kong-based conglomerate, and they own everything from airlines to food and beverage to property. So they own Cathay Pacific, the flagship airline for Hong Kong. They own tons of property developments in Hong Kong and China, the rights for Coca-Cola bottling in Hong Kong and other markets. So what I liked about Mark's session was he was focused on sustainability and implementing best practices in terms of sustainability. Our industry, a lot of times when you talk to, doesn't matter whether it's a venue or an organizer, they always talk about how complicated our industry is. There's so many stakeholders. You've got venues, you've got organizers, stand contractors, visitors, and exhibitors. It's too hard, it's too challenging to make a sustainable event. And I mean, my gosh, to get Mark up there and talk about a business that's as different as running an airline to building a residential property development. And his whole talk was based on how to try and put in measurements and how to be flexible enough so that these very different businesses can go about trying to be more sustainable. I think there were a lot of lessons for our industry on, if we try hard enough, it's achievable.
Fascinating. I know that UFI is also taking the lead in the net zero carbon events initiative. So, I mean, it kind of
Right.
goes along with that in terms of having that kind of speaker. And sounds like a high level, fascinating discussion by a leader from outside the industry.
From outside the industry. Yeah, and we did something similar in Amsterdam at the GCS, the Global CEO Summit. And I think we'll get similar results when we get the feedback from the post-event surveys. But it's really useful to have outside industry speakers just on topics that are obviously applicable to our industry. But my guess is Mark will come out as the highest or one of the highest rated speakers for the whole 2-day conference.
So, who is your chair this year for your region?
Okay, so we don't do a chair, like the GCS has a
Oh, okay.
chair that runs the
Okay.
event, but we did have elections last year, so we have chapter leadership in Asia, and our chair is Panitha Buri, also known as Mook from BITEC, which is a venue in Bangkok. Yeah, and actually
So
sustainability, sorry, I was just going
yeah,
to add, sustainability
yeah.
is one of her, she during her 3-year term, she really wants to make that one of her focuses in Asia. And to be frank, I think Asia's behind both the US and Europe in terms of
Mm.
focusing on sustainability. So I think it's really great that MOOC wants to do that. And we had a number of sessions on sustainability. We had a panel session with venues, organizers, and contractors talking about sustainability. And we also had Sabine, who comes from the Flanders Convention and Exhibition Center in Belgium, and she was talking about best practices in terms of F&B, like implementing sustainable food practices, which is something I think all of us can relate to, reducing food waste, making sure that we source food locally. Yes. So that was a key focus on our event.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the region. The UV Global Barometer came out in January. I know there'll be
Yeah.
another one that comes out midway through the year, but what stood out to you in the data that you think that our audience of trade show organizers over here in North America might want to know about?
Sure. I would say it is almost universally optimistic, positive, good news. So that's nice. It's easy to start with that. In India as the growth story, so the Indian exhibition market is really underdeveloped. It was held back for a lot of years because the venues just weren't there. There weren't enough venues to support the shows that organizers wanted to launch. And now that we have a number of new venues coming in India, some of them have come in during COVID and just after. So that's unlocking a lot of growth for the industry in India. And I think just in general, the Indian economy is really on fire. It's the fastest growing economy in Asia, I think. So that could be a growth story that could run, kind of China has been a 20-year growth story in terms of the overall economy. And now it could be India's turn to shine. So I think people are really excited about I'd put that as the number one headline from Asia.
Good to
Yep.
know. Good to know for us over here in the US. So how things are coming, because I know we talked about this briefly before, but just even the reopening and the economy took longer to come back in some places in your region. So it's really
Yeah,
exciting to have good news.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, for us, COVID was still a reality at the beginning, or I should say, COVID restrictions were really a reality for many markets in Asia at the beginning of last year. So it doesn't feel like ancient history to us. And that's why last year was sort of getting our legs back, and this year is really back to growth. I think the other thing I'd point out is there's a lot of news coverage on the Chinese economy and that the economy there is slowing down. But it's all relative. I mean, the GDP growth in China is still going to be higher than most Western developed countries. So although it is slower, definitely, China
What's it
accounts.
coming predicted to come in at? Do you know off the top of your head? I
Yeah,
can I'll pull it. I
so
didn't
it's
pull it.
kind of like for the past 20 years, it's kind of been incredible at like 6, 7, 8% GDP growth
Yeah,
year after year.
right.
And now I think it's low single digits, like 3 or 4. Yeah, you'd have to fact check
Okay.
that, but it's
Yeah.
like
Okay.
3 or 4% somewhere in there.
Okay. Lower
Uh,
than it has been, essentially, is the
but
point,
but
right?
st- but still but still
Yeah.
growing. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, but
Uh,
still growing. Exactly.
and it accounts for more than 60% of net space sold in Asia. So it is just super important. It sets the tone for the whole exhibition industry in Asia. And it slower, yes, different than before COVID, maybe a little bit more domestically focused because of geopolitics are playing a part in that as well. But overall, like if you look at international organizers that have huge portfolios in China, so let's say Reed and Informa would be the biggest. I think they're really happy with how their events are doing, especially in the major exhibition cities. So that's Shanghai, Shenzhen.
That's good to know. So those two headlines, India and then also China.
Right. Yeah. And that's a
Yeah.
big chunk of the market. Yeah. That's like 75% of the market here.
So anything else that are there any challenges or any areas of that you're watching, your board and your leadership are taking notice
Yeah.
of beyond sustainability? I know that is huge
So that's one that
around the globe.
yep, that's one that's new. Another is rising costs, and that's got to be an issue in the States, I would imagine as well. Most of the events here, especially the bigger ones, are going to have a significant international component. So that means higher costs in terms of flight, accommodation, all of those, getting goods in and out of a market. So using freight forwarding, all of those are raising the cost of exhibitors to participate in events. So that just means that number one, there's going to be a little bit of a flight to quality. So in big markets, like let's stick with China for a second, you've got second, third tier, even fourth tier cities. There's lots of shows in those markets that I think are going to be struggling compared to the tier one cities, which are, for your viewers, the four key cities in China for the exhibition market: Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou. That's 80% of the market right there. So the leading shows in those markets will do better, I think, because they're the sort of the higher quality ones are not going to be hit by the rising costs. People will be willing to spend to be at those events. But that's not just in China. I mean, that's in Singapore and Bangkok and Hong Kong. Costs are going up. In the States, it must be the same, I assume, right?
Exactly. Inflation for sure. The rising costs it's been creeping up for a little while now. So,
Yeah,
but that was great insight. You obviously know the market really well, and that I appreciate you sharing your insight about what's going
sure.
on in those regions. So, thank you very much, Mark, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
What's next for you? What's your next event that you're headed to?
So we have quite a few UFI events coming up, which I should plug. So we've got MIA, which is in Kigali in Rwanda this year. And we also have in Zurich, the European conference is in June. And for me, in my region, the next big one that I'll be going to will be the Shanghai CEO Summit, which is also in June.
Oh, it's in June. Okay.
Yeah.
Not is that the one with CISO as well, or are you
Oh,
doing that Asia CEO?
Yeah, so those are two different ones. So the Shanghai CEO Summit's
Okay.
really just for the China market, and that's in June. And then the Asia CEO Summit, which is in Singapore, has been for the last 3 years. That's always in late September or October. And I should know the
Okay.
dates, but I don't. But
I
I think it's late September this year. Yeah, in Singapore.
We'll be sure to include a link. It's
Yeah,
hard to
yeah,
remember
please
all
give those a plug. Yeah.
those dates. Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, signing off here for evening for me, and have a good day over there.
Thanks, Danica.